let's talk about tax collection, or a tax collector in particular, Zacchaeus. Let's talk about our leadership lessons from Luke. Looking at today, at our theme for today is responding to inappropriate behavior or avoiding inappropriate behavior. What should we be doing? I thought it was a good trend of the way that Jesus handled and interacted with Zacchaeus was actually, we could learn a lot as leaders on about inappropriate behavior. However, I also thought we just spoke about the RBA, and what better to talk about than a tax collector on this? So, I mean, look, I'm just going to read through it and just stop and preach for a bit, and then Dr. Rod and I will chat a little bit. But this is from Luke 19. Actually, Dr. Rod, I'm going to show my biblical ignorance. I don't confess to knowing everything about the Bible. When I was doing my research, I couldn't find this story of Zacchaeus in any other books. Is that correct? Is this only in Luke?
I think what you'll find is that there are some stories that appear in only one of the Gospels, or not in all of the Gospels. I don't think that's an issue at all. If you and I were writing a story about, your time living with us, for example, they wouldn't be the same.
Yes. No, but
that
I was just
doesn't mean
curious.
one of them is not true. I think you are.
Am I
correct.
right that
Yeah,
wasn't Luke? Luke, was it good? I'm just making sure I didn't miss.
But yeah, well, look, maybe I'm not a better Bible scholar than you anyway. There are some things I know. There are some
put
things
down
I
in
don't.
comments. Comment below if you happen to know if this is in any other of the books, because I read through this and I'm like, I thought there was more to the story than what is in here, and I tried to find it in one of the other books. I couldn't. So if you know where it is, put it down below. We'd love to be able to hear you out and read where it is elsewhere. Or maybe it was just from my Sunday school days that they elaborated on the story to make it more interesting for kids. But we're in Luke 19, starting from verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. Back in those days, as I understand it, the tax collectors would go around and they would pretty much, am I right, Dr. Rod, in saying they would tell you how much tax you owe?
Oh, generally, yes. I mean, they were agents of the Roman authorities, but they were able to charge a levy on top of that, which they could put in their own pocket. So they had to pass over to the Romans the Roman tax, but they could demand of people that they pay more than that, and they generally did. And that's how they became wealthy. They exploited other people.
So not a good dude, right? Inappropriate behavior, if I do say so. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. I'm going to stop there for a moment. Dr. Rod, business leaders, should we be climbing trees? Is that appropriate behavior?
Well, maybe if you're a short business leader and you see Jesus coming your way, climb a tree.
I kind of read this and I'm like, I automatically went, climbing a tree? That's like, we kind of, like, as a story of Zacchaeus, we get it. Like, Zacchaeus was a wee man, was he climbed a tree, right? Like, we know that. But it's like, when you actually think about it, it's like, this was a very wealthy dude who was running and scampering up, probably wearing Louis Vuitton. He was probably wearing the finest of clothes and jewelry and everything. Probably had bags full of coins or whatever. Trying to climb the tree. Interesting. But my mind went to, I don't know why, my mind went, that's kind of inappropriate behavior, climbing a tree. Do we see that nowadays with business leaders or leaders? And I thought about Tom Cruise when he was on Oprah and he was jumping up and down on that couch. That was inappropriate behavior. Same with climbing a tree. We need to,
Look, I think
hold ourselves.
he may not have been the only person climbing a tree, and there are plenty of times, when people do try to get a better vantage point. And I mean, I think Zacchaeus was curious about Jesus like so many other people. He would have heard about Jesus. He would have heard about his teaching. He would have heard about his miracles. I'm certain he had no expectation that Jesus was even going to acknowledge him.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have expected that Jesus was going to invite himself to his house. But he must have heard about Jesus. He was curious. I doubt that he had any intention of changing his ways at that time, but he just wanted to see, well, who is this dude who everyone's talking? Who is this guy who goes around healing people and doing good?
Exactly.
And so sometimes, you know what, metaphorically, as leaders, we need to climb a tree.
We need to climb a
Get
tree.
a better view. We
Get
do.
a better
We do.
vantage point. So true. And if it's worth seeing, sometimes if it's Jesus, then sometimes do something inappropriate to get closer to Jesus. Go for it.
Well, I'd climb a tree to see Jordan Peterson. Probably not
Yes.
Joe Biden, but Jordan Peterson. I'd climb a
Or
tree
maybe
for him.
you'd climb a tree with Joe Biden around to make sure he doesn't nibble you. Maybe that would
maybe.
be the
Maybe.
when we're starting to get a little inappropriate. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said, as Dr. Rod alluded to, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Inappropriate behaviour. Dr. Rod, sometimes we do hang out with people that aren't the most appropriate people, and how do we avoid, how do we find that balance between still witnessing, caring, loving for people, but then also being wise with the company we keep?
Look, we're not Jesus. We don't necessarily always have the same level of discernment as he. But my view of this whole story is that Jesus was just going about his daily business. He was doing what Jesus did. He was out and about. He was with people. He was teaching people. He was healing people. He was, as the Bible says, going about doing good. And in all likelihood, people didn't know exactly what path he was going to take or know exactly where he was going to be. Word would have gone around that, hey, Jesus is coming, and Zacchaeus probably heard about that and wanted to go and see. Now, I think one of the significant things, I do believe that Jesus was wrongly accused of seeking sinners. And I know a lot of Christians say, if Jesus was on earth today, he'd be in the pubs and in the brothels. And no, he wouldn't. He'd be going about doing good, and he'd minister to everybody whom he came across. And I think that was what was going on here. He never sought out the sinners. He just ministered to anyone whose path crossed with his.
Yeah.
And he would have understood something about Zacchaeus, that he wasn't liked, even loved by people. He would have known that he was somebody who, in all likelihood, was exploiting particularly the poor, the weak, the vulnerable. And why wouldn't Jesus want to minister to him? But I think the big point that Jesus was making in publicly saying, I'm coming to your house, he was actually affirming the value of Zacchaeus as a person. He wasn't condoning his personality or his job or what he did, but he was affirming Zacchaeus as a person. So I don't think Jesus perceived himself as going to the house of a sinner. He perceived himself as going to the house of someone who was created by and loved by God and who was going to minister to him, which of course is really what happened, because Zacchaeus was transformed.
Yeah, actually, on that, so we look at, he says, I'm coming to your house, and then Zacchaeus stood up and then said, Lord, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount. Just as a bit of a side note, he must have been ridiculously wealthy if he can give away half and promise to give people back 4 times what he had. He must have been making some massive interest on his money, or had some really successful businesses that he was doing with that money. That aside, I find it interesting that it wasn't after Jesus had spent time with him as he had his house and reprimanded him and corrected him and advised him and shared stories or whatever. Jesus just said, I'm coming to your house, and Zacchaeus gone, all right, I give up. Everyone, you get everything back. And he had his own personal revelation without needing reprimand or anything like that. So I find that reasonably interesting. And I suppose as a bit of a side thing is, I think that as a leadership lesson from from one of these things that many things we can learn from Jesus as being a great leader is, when we are a great leader, we just inspire that action out of people. We don't always have to try to mentor them through or anything. Sometimes if we carry that much presence, if we live that good of an example, we should have that positive impact on people, that they're just like, I don't know, Dr. Rod, as a pastor, I'm sure you have people that you'll meet, they'll introduce themselves and they'll ask, what do you do? And you're like, I'm a pastor. And then they start breaking down and going, oh, I've done this wrong and I've done that wrong. And I should. Like, do you get any random supermarket confessions, Dr. Rod?
Not yet. But you know, as a leader, wouldn't I love it if my very presence caused people to repent and become followers of Jesus Christ, then go and make amends to all those people that they had wronged. I mean, it's a marvelous story. And I think it shows that our presence can often be a lot more important than our speech. In other words, who we are can be far more important than what we say.
Yes. Who we are could be far more important than what we say. Walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. So much. Let me just finish this off then. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham, where the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. I actually find really interesting in that last section is that when Jesus says salvation has come to your household, not just, okay, Zacchaeus, you're saved. But I find it really interesting that the head of the house, what his actions did actually resulted in a positive outcome for everyone. And kind of as a bit of a metaphor, as leaders, our actions should benefit our entire organizations or our entire team. Yeah, let's leave that aside. Bit of a theological question. There's a lot of debate about this, about families being saved by the actions of one person in the family. What's your take on that, Dr. Roddy, in aspects of this, what he's saying here?
It's not a law, but there is a principle here, and that is if you like, the household leader gives themselves over to Jesus Christ, then often others will follow, because leadership being influence.
Yeah,
that's not the only thing it is, but leadership is certainly about influence, among other things. Your influence will cause other people to follow. So, many people will quote the experience of the prison guard, with Paul and Silas there. And, his whole household was saved.
Yeah.
And then say, well, that's going to be the case for your household. Well, I don't think so, because I also believe in individual freedom of choice. But if you are a leader within the context of your home, your community, an organisation, what you do will have a significant influence on others. I mean, this is why it is so important for us as leaders to be a good example, because people will take
Yes.
their cues from our example.
Yeah, that's true. And I suppose that kind of brings a full circle to our conversation about inappropriate behavior. We're talking about how do we act or respond to inappropriate behavior? How do we avoid it? Well, I think what you're saying there is we need to be aware that what we do influences other people. And so if we are able to be in better control of our behavior, then we can help better influence those people around us. If that's how we avoid inappropriate behavior by ourselves, be disciplined, be guarded, make sure you are representing the best version of yourself, not just doing whatever random whims that you have in the moment, like nibbling babies. But just like with Zacchaeus, that, you know what, when he was influenced by Jesus, he just straight away went and changed his life, straight away just confessed, I'm going to give everything back, I'm going to, whatever. But then as a result of that, his family was saved because of his actions. Not necessarily it was an automatic, but it was a lead because it would influence. And so I think that that's just the moral of the story today. If we're looking at inappropriate leaders, we need to understand that it's our behavior that is what influences people, not what we say, not our posts on social media. It's what are we doing in our everyday life? How do we live out our Christianity? How do we live out our life to be as close to Christ? Is that really being the influence? Is that really influencing in a positive way? Or is our actions just speaking against what we're doing and causing us to be inappropriate? Maybe we're having inappropriate leaders that we're serving under. Well, you know what? You be the good example. Yes, we've spoken about all the different things you can do, but what if you were the one that was able to be the good example and the representation, hopefully influence a person that is leading you as well? Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.